It started with the ceiling. Not a metaphorical one, the literal drywall above our living room couch. A hairline crack had appeared just left of the light fixture, slithering like some impatient vine stretching toward the corner. I pointed it out to Abigail one morning, balancing a mug of coffee in one hand and a stepladder diagram in the other, already halfway through diagnosing how deep the damage went. She blinked at it, unimpressed. "It's not that big of a deal, Sean." Which, if you know Abigail, is code for, "This is boring and I would rather discuss anything else, such as the physics of Lent." Now, in most marriages, a crack in the ceiling would lead to a joint trip to the hardware store, a weekend of grumbling over plaster mix ratios, and maybe, if you're really lucky, a mild argument about the proper direction to apply primer. But not in ours. In ours, it became something of a silent Cold War. I stared at the ceiling. Abigail stared at her phone. Neither of us particularly interested in what the other was doing. So I fixed it. Because I'm the kind of guy who can't leave something hanging, be it drywall or conversation. I patched it up, painted over the evidence, and felt mildly triumphant until I realized it looked exactly the same as before. A slightly less confident version of the crack. A metaphor, perhaps, just not the one I was ready to face. The real crack, of course, didn't live in the ceiling. It sat across from me at the dinner table, gracefully scooping quinoa salad like she wasn't hiding a secret behind her clinically perfect posture. Now here's the part you didn't see coming. The part where I don't find lipstick on a collar or a text from Greg Woozyface, or a misplaced earring in the glove box. No, Abigail's infidelity revealed itself through community theater. That's right, our local theater company, Stagecraft, because irony is a communal sport in this town, put on a production of A Streetcar Named Desire. Abigail, in a move that surprised absolutely no one but delighted herself immensely, took on the role of Stella. I, in a move that surprised myself, bought front-row tickets for opening night, partly out of spousal duty, partly because the idea of seeing my wife slap someone on stage intrigued me more than our Wednesday night book club. And let me tell you, she was good. Too good. I'd seen Abigail perform before, back when we were both 29, and she played Ophelia in a production that was 70% Hamlet, 30% experimental lighting choices. But this was different. This was Abigail glowing. Not just stage lights, something internal. She moved with this odd, charged elegance, like she knew something the rest of us didn't. There was a new sharpness in the way she delivered her lines, a rhythm that wasn't rehearsed but lived in. And the guy playing Stanley, Jack Kinley, an insurance claims adjuster with a part-time CrossFit obsession and an emotional range typically reserved for chia pets, suddenly had chemistry. Real, electric, uncomfortable chemistry. In the second act, when he pulled her close during an argument, it didn't feel like acting. Not to me. And when the curtain fell and everyone stood for a standing ovation, I sat there, clapping politely, wondering what in the world I'd just witnessed. After the show, Abigail found me in the lobby, still flushed from the performance, signing playbills like she was trying to impress her own reflection. "Well?" she asked, her eyes bright and scanning mine. "You were convincing," I said, and I meant it. Convincing like a tax audit. She laughed, leaned in, kissed me on the cheek, and turned to talk to one of her castmates. Not Jack, interestingly. Jack was nowhere to be seen, which, for someone who just poured his theatrical soul into a 5-minute shouting match and 6 shirtless scenes, struck me as curious. I didn't think much of it then. I chalked it up to my usual brand of neurotic overthinking, a finely honed talent. But then came the next show, and the next, and the next. Abigail started staying late after rehearsals for notes and cast bonding, phrases I began to associate with the slow erosion of my evenings. And I kept patching up metaphorical ceilings. But the real unraveling happened at the cast party, hosted by the director, a woman named Loretta who wore scarves in 90-degree weather and had opinions about candle scents. I tagged along because Abigail said I'd been too isolated lately, which, again, is code for "you're starting to have conversations with the toaster, and I'm concerned." The party was full of what I now call theater people energy, a lot of finger food and dramatic hand gestures. I was nursing a flat Coke and trying to bond with a lighting technician over our shared hatred of dimmer switches when I overheard something from the hallway. It wasn't shouting. It wasn't moaning. It wasn't even whispering. It was just one sentence, low, quiet, and undeniably clear. "You know this is more than just acting, right?" It wasn't Jack's voice. It wasn't Abigail's either. It was Loretta's, in a tone I would describe as dangerously nurturing. I moved without thinking. Walked into the hall like I had every right to be there, which I suppose, legally, I did, and found Abigail and Jack standing by the coat rack, too close for any coat-related business. She was fiddling with the sleeve of his jacket. He looked like a deer who'd been handed a Shakespeare monologue. They both looked up when they saw me. Abigail didn't jump back. She didn't panic. She didn't look guilty. She just smiled, that same practiced, stage-ready smile she used when she forgot her lines and wanted the audience to think it was intentional. "Sean," she said, smoothing her blouse like it had recently betrayed her. "We were just bonding," I offered. "Like theater people do. Method right." Jack mumbled something about air and slipped outside like he had left his personality in the car. Abigail looked at me, searching for a script that would make this scene play out differently. But I wasn't interested in lines. I was interested in the look on her face, the one she didn't rehearse. And there it was. Not shame, not even regret. Just exhaustion. The kind that comes when you've spent too long lying to yourself and forgot which version you sold to your spouse. We left the party early. I didn't ask questions. She didn't offer explanations. The car ride home was quiet in that freshly vacuumed kind of way. Empty, but somehow still irritating. At home, I went to the bathroom, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to look in the mirror and see if I could find the moment I stopped being the person Abigail loved and started being the guy she politely tolerated. I didn't see it, but I did see something else, that crack in the ceiling above the sink. A new one. Faint. Just starting. And this time, I didn't bother to fix it. It took approximately 3 days for things to start smelling funny. Not literally, don't get excited, just socially. 3 days after the cast party, Abigail developed what she called a creative hangover, which, as far as I could tell, involved drinking chamomile tea, staring at Pinterest boards with aggressive intensity, and pretending to journal while mostly just drawing circles. She claimed it was part of her decompression routine, something I had never heard of in the previous 7 years, but was apparently essential now, like multivitamins for emotional exhaustion. Meanwhile, I started hearing from people who hadn't spoken to me in months. People who barely remembered we were married. You know, those fun, passive-aggressive small-town friends who start conversations with, "Hey, don't want to get in the middle of anything, but..." If a sentence begins like that, it's never about how well your lawn looks or how proud they are of your recycling efforts. The first was Dennis Langford, a guy who once tried to sell me a used leaf blower for $90 and still texts me whenever there's a beer tasting at his cousin's brewery. He messaged me, "Yo, bro, saw Abigail at the community arts mixer. Didn't know she was doing the improv thing now. Pretty wild stuff." I stared at the message longer than necessary, trying to figure out if improv thing was code for adultery or if she'd just joined a new hobby cult. I replied with a standard, "Huh," and he came back with, "Yeah, she and Jack were running scenes all over the place. Got pretty flirty. At one point, they fake married each other and did a whole honeymoon in Tampa bit. You had to be there." I did not have to be there. I felt perfectly fine not having been anywhere near Abigail and Jack pretending to argue about sunscreen and travel adapters in front of a crowd of middle-aged accountants in turtlenecks. That night, I asked her casually, "So you doing improv now?" Which is really a question no one should ever have to ask their spouse unless they're preparing for a divorce or a secondhand embarrassment emergency. She blinked at me, very slowly. "Just a little. It's good for character work." "Oh, yeah, improvising. Very useful, especially if you find yourself, say, in a courtroom or being interrogated by your spouse." She didn't laugh. Instead, she got up, poured herself more tea, and mumbled something about authenticity exercises. I nodded like that was a normal thing to say in a marriage. But it wasn't Dennis's message that tipped the scales. No, that honor goes to the legendary Facebook group debacle. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that the surest way to ruin your week is to join a Facebook group with the words community or township in the name. Abigail had been part of Maple Ridge Civic Creatives, a name that suggested PDA meetings and watercolors, not scandal. I joined the group on a Tuesday night, expecting to see pictures of murals and crochet workshops. What I found instead was a post from a woman named Lynette, Abigail's stage manager, costume wrangler, and apparently accidental whistleblower. Lynette had posted a long-winded farewell letter to the theater group, citing a toxic environment of unspoken romantic entanglements. Most of it read like a rejected Dear Abby column, but one sentence stood out. It is wildly unprofessional for two lead actors to carry on a relationship offstage that directly affects their onstage chemistry to the detriment of the ensemble. There were exactly 13 comments under the post when I saw it. 7 were popcorn emojis. 4 were variations of I knew it. One was Jack's cousin, typing in all caps, "Y'all nasty." The last one, from a woman named Cheryl, simply said, "Abigail always did like to commit to a role." So, just to recap, my wife, Abigail, and Jack, he of the t-shirts too tight and vocabulary too small, were apparently starring in both the local theater production and a soap opera I didn't know I was subscribed to. Now, I'm not the kind of guy who flies off the handle, mostly because I don't like flying and I have a weak handle. But I also don't believe in jumping to conclusions. I believe in walking briskly to them with strong supporting evidence. So I did what any overly patient husband with decent Wi-Fi would do. I started archiving posts, screenshots, comments, Abigail's check-ins, a photo from the cast party where her hand is just a little too familiar with the small of Jack's back. I wasn't compiling a case. I was compiling clarity, and maybe a tiny bit of passive-aggressive fuel. Then came the real kicker. On a sunny Saturday morning, one of those weekends that tries to seduce you into forgetting you're probably being emotionally bamboozled, I ran into Jack's roommate, Cal, at the copy place downtown. Cal, for context, is a man who wears flip-flops year-round and thinks privacy is a government conspiracy. "Sean," he said, a little too loud for a room full of people stapling tax forms. "Hey man, Abigail said you're totally cool with her and Jack now. That's really mature of you." I smiled. That tight, corporate smile you use when someone just insulted your intelligence and complimented your shirt at the same time. "Did she now?" I said, flipping through my copies. "Oh yeah, dude. She told Jack you guys were all good. Said you understood it was a creative thing. Like, the emotions bled over, and you knew it was temporary. That's awesome, man. Seriously. So evolved." I nodded slowly, resisting the urge to staple something unnecessary. "Yeah, super evolved. Like a lizard, but with marriage papers." He laughed and wandered off to the section with the novelty binders. I stood there, watching him go, realizing that my wife had not only rewritten the script of our marriage, she'd also handed out new lines to the supporting cast. At that point, the decision wasn't hard. I didn't confront her. I didn't launch into an "I know what you did" monologue. I didn't even change my tone. That would have made it feel theatrical, and frankly, she'd gotten enough stage time. Instead, I waited for the next community theater meeting, because yes, I attended those now, and no, I don't know what that says about me. Abigail was giving a little speech about artistic transparency, whatever that meant, and I raised my hand. "Quick question," I said. "In scene work, how do you recommend separating real emotions from the fictional ones, especially when, say, an affair is involved?" She froze. Not dramatically, not like in a movie. Just, she paused, like a computer buffering. The room was silent. Jack was drinking from a bottle of coconut water like he hoped it would teleport him somewhere else. Lynette's eyes went wide. Cheryl coughed. Abigail answered, eventually, with something about boundaries and creative energy, and I nodded, thanked her, and sat down. The next morning, I packed a suitcase. Not for me. For her. Left it by the door. Didn't say a word. She came down the stairs, saw it, and blinked like it was a dog that had wandered into the house. "Is that?" "Yep," I said, sipping coffee. "Where am I going?" "Back to whatever version of reality makes you feel most like the main character," I said. She didn't argue. She didn't cry. She just stood there, like someone who'd been caught rehearsing lines in the wrong play. And then she left, and I fixed the crack in the ceiling again. Because sometimes, you've got to patch things just to remind yourself you can. Abigail came back on a Tuesday. Of course she did. Nobody ever ruins your week properly on a Monday. Monday is reserved for printer jams, overdue bills, and the philosophical dread of reheating leftovers. But Tuesday? That's Betrayal's favorite day. She didn't knock. Didn't call. Just walked in with that strange combination of entitlement and casual confidence that only someone who's completely convinced of their own moral flexibility can manage. The key still worked. My mistake, apparently. She stood in the entryway like someone who had just arrived at a yoga class by accident but decided to stay because she already paid for the water bottle. Hair done, minimal makeup, purse that cost more than our mattress. I was sitting on the couch, sorting a box of power cords, because when your wife secretly joins a community theater love triangle, you start reassessing what every plug in your house is for. It's a process, she said, Sean, with that same upward lilt she used when she wanted to pretend we were on the same team, like I hadn't just packed her suitcase 4 days ago like a particularly unenthusiastic hotel concierge. Abigail, I replied, not looking up from a cable I hadn't used since 2013, but suddenly had a deep, emotional connection with. I didn't expect you to. Well, the suitcase was a bit dramatic. Next time I'll laminate a brochure, I said, placing a mystery adapter in the maybe still useful pile. Or do a slideshow with stock music. She sighed, the kind of sigh that suggested she'd spent the morning emotionally preparing herself by journaling next to a scented candle and then probably listening to a podcast called Radical Compassion or something equally allergic to accountability. I think we should talk. Sure. You want to schedule something, or is now fine? I asked, standing up and dusting my hands off like I'd just performed a complicated tech surgery. She glanced around, clearly noting that nothing in the house had changed since her departure, as if she expected me to turn her absence into a HGTV special. No new throw pillows. No brooding in the dark with a guitar. Just regular life. My regular life. Minus the deceit. I feel like you misunderstood everything, she began, and there it was, the official Olympic event of the guilty, rewriting the narrative mid-conversation. I was surprised she didn't come in with charts. I nodded. Yeah, probably. The whole secret relationship with your co-star that you told people I was totally cool with part? Really hard to interpret that one clearly without flashcards. Her mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, not quite a wince. It's more complicated than you think. Wow, you really should copyright that. It's more complicated than you think. Perfect slogan for a person who got caught and still wants sympathy. She didn't respond right away, choosing instead to walk into the living room like she still owned a percentage of it. She sat on the edge of the chair she never actually used when she lived here, like she was visiting from a timeshare in denial. I made mistakes, she offered, like she was applying for a parking ticket waiver. No kidding. Your improv club thinks monogamy is a lighting cue, I said. Let me guess, Jack is your emotional twin, and I'm just your practical partner. That's usually the breakdown in these things, right? Her face went blank. Where are you getting all this? Oh, here and there. The internet. Mutual friends. That guy Cal who thinks confidentiality is a construct. Honestly, I could probably sell the screenplay rights at this point. Abigail pressed her lips together and crossed her arms like she was waiting for a commercial break to save her. I just think we got off track, Sean. We haven't connected in a long time, right? Because connection is usually measured by how convincingly you can sneak around with someone who once did a protein shake commercial for YouTube. He's not important to this conversation. Agreed, I said, cutting her off. This isn't about him. This is about you and me. And the part where you thought I'd just sit here and applaud your spiritual growth while you auditioned for new husbands during scene rehearsal. She stood up then, fast, like movement would somehow make her point more valid. I didn't plan for it to happen, Sean. It was organic. I laughed. Out loud. I couldn't help it. Organic. Like kale. Like free-range betrayal. That's not fair. Neither is being lied to for 3 months while I alphabetized our tax receipts and you memorized Jack's facial expressions. She stared at me for a moment, probably realizing the exit interview wasn't going how she imagined. There was no emotional meltdown. No begging. No passive agreement. Just me. On the couch. Sorting wires. Wearing socks with a hole in the toe. Refusing to be part of her live-action fantasy, where she was both victim and protagonist. I thought you'd at least want to talk about what this means, she said. I do. It means you should take your suitcase and get the rest of your things before I start listing them on Facebook Marketplace under the category Miscellaneous Lessons in Bad Judgment. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Then opened it again like a confused goldfish in a therapy session. You're really not going to fight for this. Was I supposed to audition? Read a monologue? Maybe do a trust fall with Jack backstage while you stare dramatically into the middle distance? That's not what I meant. Then say what you mean, Abigail. For once. She didn't. She just stood there, quietly recalculating her route like a GPS that refused to admit she'd taken the wrong exit hours ago. I walked to the front door and opened it. Not with anger, not with a grand gesture, just with a quiet, practiced motion, like I'd done it before. Because I had. I did it when she left the first time. I did it again when I stopped waiting for her to come back with something other than a half-rehearsed apology and a yoga mat of self-discovery excuses. She stood by the door, hesitating. She looked around the room one more time, as if she expected it to stop her. But the couch didn't cry. The lamp didn't flicker. The cords were still sorted. "You'll regret this," she said. I smiled. "Only if you take the charger I need for my laptop." She picked up the suitcase. She didn't slam the door. She didn't look back. She just left, finally understanding that I didn't need a confrontation. I needed clarity. And I got it. The phrase, revenge, has a bad reputation. It conjures up images of torn-up love letters, bleach in closets, or dramatic speeches shouted across public venues. It's theatrical, messy, and most of the time, deeply inefficient. I don't do inefficient. I work in IT. My revenge, if you can call it that, was more of a system optimization. It started with the joint accounts. We'd set those up 3 years into our marriage when Abigail suddenly decided she was financially fluid, which, in regular English, meant she spent like an heiress with amnesia. I handled all the online banking. Not because I demanded control, but because Abigail said numbers stress her out. And I, being an idiot who believed in division of labor, agreed. Now that she was gone, in both the physical and moral sense, it made no sense to keep things merged. So I logged in and started unplugging. Not out of spite, just practicality. I wasn't going to bankroll her next interpretive rehearsal on romantic authenticity. Unlinking accounts led me to the shared calendar. Yes, we had one. Yes, it was color-coded. Yes, I maintained it. Because I am a simple man who enjoys order, clean cabinets, and knowing when someone is going to pretend she has a voice workshop, but is really sipping soy lattes with a man whose beard looks like it was sculpted by a committee. I started adjusting the calendar. Little things. Subtle. For example, I left in the next theater board meeting but added a new title. Closed rehearsal. Betrayal. A personal retrospective. Q&A after. I marked her dentist appointment as professional teeth whitening for lying purposes. And I invited Jack. Yes, I found his email. To a fictional improv session labeled Honesty, the scene you always avoid. I didn't think he'd actually show up, but the idea of him checking his calendar and blinking at that was worth the effort. Then I moved on to the house. Abigail hadn't taken much with her when she left, just the suitcase and whatever self-awareness she could cram into it. But she did leave behind her framed quote collection, 6 different pieces of decor that all tried very hard to be deep, but mostly read like fortune cookies with a design degree. Things like, do more of what makes you happy, and she believed she could, so she did. I relocated all 6 to one room, the laundry room. That way, the next time she came by to grab her leftover throw pillows or the French press that gave her creative clarity, she'd find her entire personality condensed between a dryer and a bottle of fabric softener. Next was the streaming account. We'd shared profiles for years. Mine was filled with documentaries, sci-fi, and the occasional survival show. Hers, romantic dramas, historical fiction where everyone had excellent cheekbones, and, inexplicably, baking competitions in languages she didn't speak. I renamed her profile to Temporary Viewer, Trial Period. Then I gave it a new watch list, documentaries about deception, personal finance basics, and that one series about cults I'd been meaning to get around to. I locked mine with a passcode. Not because I thought she'd want to watch anything, but because I found the act of adding a password satisfying. For digits. Easy to remember. 2015, the year I married her. I also discovered she'd left her theater group's shared Google Drive logged in on our home computer. It was meant for sharing rehearsal schedules and scripts. Naturally, I couldn't resist a quick browse. Among the folders titled Props Inventory and Costume Sketches, there was one oddly named Workshop_Materials _delete. Inside were videos. Bad ones. Well-lit, overacted, underthought out, experimental recordings of the group doing things like walking slowly across the room while pretending to be emotional baggage. Somewhere in the middle of one, Jack fell over a folding chair. Abigail laughed. That sharp, overly theatrical laugh she only did when she wanted to be seen as carefree and mysterious. I renamed the video file, "This Aged Poorly.mov." Then I shared it with the group. No message, just a subtle reminder that files, like people, should be reviewed for relevance. But the final update came courtesy of a little-known town newsletter, the Maple Ridge Chronicle, run by a man named Irving who still used Microsoft Publisher like it owed him rent. Irving loved a personal essay. Every month, he included one on page 6, Voices from Maple Ridge. It was supposed to be anonymous, but everyone always knew who wrote them. That month's edition? Mine. I submitted a short piece titled Exit Strategies and What They Don't Teach You at Theater Camp. I changed the names. I changed the town. I made Jack a yoga instructor with a tragic inability to sit through a full conversation. I described a marriage built on supportive silence and sarcastic grocery trips, slowly undone by bad acting and worse excuses. I ended it with a simple line. When someone writes their own narrative, sometimes it's polite to let them finish. Just don't be surprised if they get the ending wrong. Irving printed it, right below the ad for used lawn furniture. 2 days later, Abigail texted me. Not a call, not a voicemail, just one sentence. Really mature. I replied, I know. That's why I didn't send it to your mom. There were no more messages after that. I wasn't angry. Honestly, I wasn't even hurt anymore. I was awake, and maybe a little entertained. There's a strange peace that comes from not needing someone to explain themselves. From not needing to watch them twist around in circles, trying to justify why their betrayal was really just a creative detour. I logged out of everything, cleared her from the saved addresses, removed her fingerprint from the door lock, unsubscribed her from the shared warehouse membership, the one she only used for 2 items, oversized candles and emotional distance. There was no fire, no shouting, no dramatic closure, just clean systems, updated passwords, and a perfectly quiet evening in a house that finally felt honest. The last conversation didn't start with a bang or a breakdown. It started with a calendar reminder. Abigail, being the type of person who color-coded her to-do lists and once held a 15-minute argument over the correct placement of a bookshelf, had sent me an invite. Closure meeting, optional but encouraged. Location, our old house. Time, 4 p.m. Duration, 45 minutes. Description, a chance to talk, clarify, and move forward like adults. No refreshments listed. I didn't RSVP. At 3:59, I opened the door. She was already on the porch, punctual as ever. Holding a notebook like this was a quarterly review, and I was about to be rated on my emotional performance. She walked in, took the same seat as last time. Edge of the couch, upright posture, expression carefully calibrated to be sincere, but not too sincere. The kind of face you'd wear while apologizing for backing into someone's car, not dismantling a marriage. I appreciate you agreeing to this, she said, as if I'd been summoned by some invisible force of moral obligation rather than plain old curiosity. I sat across from her, arms folded. Don't flatter yourself. I had nothing better to do than listen to creative reinterpretations of facts. She smiled, the kind of tight smile people wear during hostage negotiations. I just want to talk. Clear the air. Sure. You go ahead. I'll time it, I said, tapping my phone like this was a speech at a student council election. She took a breath. I know I've hurt you, and I take responsibility for what happened with Jack. Do you, though? I asked. Because if memory serves, you only started taking responsibility after people started laughing at your improv name in the group chat. Her eyes twitched. That wasn't about Jack. That was about everyone realizing the story doesn't work if the lead character rewrites the script halfway through and forgets to tell the cast. I cut in. Abigail flipped open the notebook. Bullet points. She came prepared. Great. I was about to be professionally debriefed on my own disappointment. I want to be honest, she said. I started feeling alone in the marriage. And naturally, instead of saying that, you decided to launch a romance subplot with a man who thinks vocal warm-ups are a personality trait. She paused. You know, for someone who always hated theater, you sure learned how to deliver a monologue. Funny. I was just thinking the same about you. Except yours had bad lighting and a weird tone shift. She looked down at her notes, pretending not to hear that one. We had grown apart. It wasn't one big thing. It was little things. You stopped listening. We stopped connecting. I nodded. Ah, the famous we. Classic move. Spread it around so it doesn't look like someone accidentally left their integrity in the rehearsal room. I'm not saying you're to blame. No, you're saying we're both to blame, which is your favorite way of saying I get 50% of your nonsense. There was a pause. That awkward, buzzing kind of pause where neither person knows if they're supposed to escalate or deflate. I didn't come here to fight, she said, finally. Good. Because if I wanted to fight, I'd have invited your acting coach and asked him to explain that crying on cue doesn't count as emotional growth. Abigail closed the notebook. Progress. I assumed this meant she was about to start improvising again. I came here because, despite everything, I care about how this ends. Don't worry, I said. This won't be a cliffhanger. Everyone dies emotionally, but leaves behind an accurate financial trail. Her expression changed then. Dropped a little. Not sad, not angry. Just resigned. Like she'd finally realized I wasn't going to deliver the emotional closure she was hoping for. No breakdown. No, let's try again. Just me. Sitting there. Tired of playing the part of the understanding one. I thought maybe, after time, we could still be something. Not a couple. Just people who could laugh about this one day. I do laugh about it, I said. Mostly when I remember Jack trying to stage cry during the board meeting. She gave a weak smile, unsure if I was joking or not. I wasn't. So that's it, she asked. You're really done? You already finished it. I'm just updating the records. She looked around the living room like it might give her a better answer. It didn't. Same furniture. Same lamp. Same throw blanket she insisted we keep because it was cozy but structured. She stood up, slowly, like she was waiting for some invisible cue to change the scene. None came. I'll get the rest of my things next week. You'll need a box for the apologies, I said. They don't fit in the suitcase. She gave a soft chuckle at that, the kind of laugh people give when they've completely run out of excuses and know it. Then she walked to the door. No dramatic pause. No emotional speech. Just a hand on the doorknob, a look back, and one last line. I did love you, you know. Yeah, I said, standing. And I loved ordering pizza on Tuesdays. Doesn't mean I want it now. The door clicked shut. And that was that. About 2 weeks after the final scene, or meeting, or whatever you want to call the awkward exit interview with my ex-wife, I woke up and realized something strange. I hadn't thought about Abigail for almost a full day. Not when I brewed my coffee. Not when I sat down at my desk. Not when I checked the mail and saw a postcard from a real estate agent smiling like she'd never been betrayed in her entire life. Just nothing. An unremarkable Tuesday without her specter floating through it. It was jarring in the most ordinary way. Like realizing a noise that's been humming in the background has finally stopped, and you don't know if you fixed it or if it just got tired. The house felt normal. Or maybe it finally belonged to me again. Same furniture, same thermostat settings, but fewer shoes by the door and significantly less unsolicited commentary on my t-shirt folding technique. I'd taken the liberty of turning the guest room into a room for things that don't need judgment. I installed shelves, labeled boxes, organized old cords that would never connect to anything again, but somehow felt important. Abigail's stuff was gone. Not in a rage cleaning, donate it all to spite her kind of way. Just methodically packed and handed off. She picked it up in silence, a short nod between us like we were co-workers exchanging staplers. That was her last visit. I didn't offer tea. She didn't pretend to reminisce. In her place, the quiet settled in, and it brought with it something far more exciting than closure. The complete lack of follow-up texts. At work, people had stopped giving me the face. You know the one. That look that says, I heard what happened and I want to express vague sympathy without committing to a full conversation about your personal life. That phase had passed. Now I was back to being Sean from tech, who fixed the printer and made sarcastic remarks about the office chairs that had clearly lost the will to function. I updated my social profiles, not with cryptic quotes or vague heartbreak posts, but just quietly. Removed the married status. Changed the shared Spotify back to private. Removed Maple Ridge Theater Community from my interests, which felt more satisfying than I expected. The algorithm took the hint. I didn't suddenly become a new person. I didn't grow a beard or take up pottery or start journaling under the moonlight. I didn't even buy new clothes. What I did do was cancel the meal kit subscription Abigail insisted on. The one where you chop 7 different things to make something that tastes like guilt in a bowl. I went back to making toast, with butter, like a man with nothing to prove. And yes, the improv group imploded. Apparently, after I posted that video and quietly left the shared Google Drive, the internal politics of low-stakes theater finally ate itself alive. Jack was voted out of the board. Lynette posted a 2,000-word essay about emotional hygiene. Abigail tried to organize a retreat, which was canceled after 3 people responded, "Not interested," in the RSVP thread. Tragic, really. She emailed me once. Subject line, clarity. I opened it expecting something dense and self-important. It was one paragraph. Sean, I hope you're doing okay. I've been doing a lot of thinking. I understand if you don't want to reply. I guess I just wanted to say I'm sorry again, in case it matters. Abigail. I stared at it for a minute. Thought about responding with something noble or witty or surgically passive-aggressive. Then I marked it as read, closed the tab, and got back to ordering a surge protector. That was the most accurate response I could give. Not cruel. Not dramatic. Just efficient. Abigail had always said I was mechanical when it came to emotions. Turns out, that was just her way of describing someone who didn't treat feelings like a performance art. The thing no one tells you about betrayal is that it doesn't explode, it erodes. Little chips in the day-to-day until one morning you realize your marriage has become a group project where only one person did the work and the other submitted someone else's script. What came after wasn't some grand reinvention. It was small things. Decluttering. Changing the Wi-Fi password. Buying the good soap without pretending it was a shared decision. I started sleeping better. Not dramatically better, just uninterrupted. No shifting next to someone radiating silent judgment or pretending to dream meaningfully. One night, I took out the trash and noticed the crack in the ceiling had returned. Same spot. Same slight fracture. I got the ladder. Fixed it again. Not because it symbolized anything. It didn't. It was just a crack. And I didn't want it there. A few weeks later, Dennis from the brewery invited me out for a trivia night. I said yes. It wasn't some heroic return to social life. It was trivia. Questions about capital cities and 90s sitcoms. But I went. I answered some questions. Got a few wrong. Laughed when someone called the host a sentient clipboard. It felt like regular life, which was a refreshing upgrade from the previous Abigail-based operating system. That's the part no one claps for. The version of moving on where there's no glow-up, no rebound story, just a clean spreadsheet and a piece you don't have to explain to anyone. No metaphors. No voiceovers. Just mornings where you wake up and don't have to brace for someone else's internal storm. I wasn't healed. I wasn't broken. I wasn't anything that dramatic. I was just done. And for the first time in a long while, that was more than enough. Now, I'm going to do laundry. Because it's Tuesday, and nothing ruins a perfectly functioning washing machine like the ghost of someone who used to insist on separating whites with emotional context. And that, my friend, is the end of that chapter. Sorted, archived, and off the shared drive. No theater credits required. Subscribe to the channel